Hello everybody and welcome to Sam and Ham. This is Ham, and today we're going to be doing some more D&D 5th edition homebrew review. Today we're going to be looking at the soldier subclass for fighter. If you can't tell by the odd spelling of soldier, this isn't your normal everyday D&D soldier. This one is a reference to Final Fantasy VII's Cloud Strife. So, this one was not made by me. This was in fact made by PapaQuackers on Reddit. Link to the original Reddit thread in the description. So let's dive right into this thing. First ability is a man and his weapon. At 3rd level you learn a ritual that creates a magical bond between yourself and a two-handed heavy weapon. You can perform the ritual over the course of an hour, which can be done part of a short rest. This weapon must be within your reach throughout the ritual, and at the conclusion of which you and the touched weapon forge the bond. Once you have bonded a weapon to yourself, so long as you're not incapacitated, that weapon becomes a reflection of you. So long as you're holding your bonded weapon, it will increase by 1 size category. Doing so will increase the damage dice of that weapon by 1 step. D10 to D12, 2D6 to 2D8, 1D12 to 2D8. And will allow you to strike 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other with a single attack. A little bit of awkward wording there, but it's pretty obvious what the creator's trying to go for here. Cloud uses big ass sword. You use big ass sword. I can appreciate it, and let's try to break down a little bit of the math here. The damage increase here is fine. It's entirely acceptable. If you're just going by champion fighter as a reference, being able to crit on a 19 is probably at least roughly comparable to this damage increase. A D10 going to a D12 is a very small damage upgrade. An average for a D10 is a 5.5, whereas the average for a D12 is 6.5. So that's only a 1 point damage increase, and 2d6 to a 2d8. It's roughly the same. D6 is average 3.5, so 2d6 is 7 on average, whereas 2d8, a d8 is 4.5 on average, bring you up to 2d8 is 9, so potentially a 2 damage increase on each one. Plus 2 damage on every attack is not nothing. That's what the dueling style is anyway. And I don't think anybody would complain about finding a free 2 damage anywhere really in their kit. But it's a little boring. But I don't think boring is necessarily a bad thing. Again, champion fighter exists. The thing that's a little bit awkward here is the whole thing about the size category. If you just do that purely for fluff, that's cool. Some people will tell you that there's a rule in the DMG that talks about size, like weapon sizing, giving it a whole nother dice, so it would be, from a D10 to 2D10. That is entirely a DM for monster rule, though. That is not inherent of finding a large weapon at all. So this harkens more back to 3.5 in Pathfinder, where sizes of weapons did increase your items like this. Pretty much exactly, and that's probably where PapaQuackers got his idea. Now, the one thing that they sneak in here that I really don't care for is this last sentence that says, will allow you to strike 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other with a single attack. That's a lot. Sure, it only pops up occasionally, but you're basically getting 2 attacks for the price of 1 here. And as much as I like the concept of, martial characters finally getting some AoE options, that's a lot of damage increase. Another interesting thing here is that this is very clearly trying to go for a certain archetype of weapons. It's trying to go for the big sword. I get it. I don't think that's a great weapon, or I don't think that's like a great design point, just because I don't really like it when a subclass dictates what kind of weapon you have to use. That's not exactly a common design philosophy, and I don't think it should be. Some people point to the Arcane Archer as, a counterpoint to this. And that's fine, as long as it's not the norm. There's a reason that Battle Master can be used by any kind of weapon user. I mean, I don't think, other than that one, other than the Arcane Archer, I can't really think of another subclass that does lock you into one kind of weapon. And then what's also kind of odd is that it just says a two-handed heavy weapon, which also would technically apply to like a heavy crossbow or a longbow. Which, I'm not going to ask how with a single arrow, you can strike 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other, but I think it's awesome. But yeah, as a summary before, moving on, I think this one's entirely balanced other than that unlimited cleave attack thing that we have going on here, but we'll get back to that. Up next is Strict Regiment. Usually at level 7, fighters get some kind of out-of-combat one here, so it kind of makes sense. There's pretty good design here. At level 7, these guys get proficiency in athletics. If you already have proficiency in athletics, you basically get expertise. You can add double your proficiency to it. In addition to that, for the purpose of short resting, you are treated as though you have 2 additional hit die. This is one of those abilities. It reminds me a lot of custom Magic the Gathering cards, where sometimes they'll say something and you know clearly what they're trying to go for, but the wording is just a little awkward. So we're going to pretend as if this is 100% the best way to word this. I'm sure there's better, I just can't think of a great way to do it. I think it's kind of an interesting idea, giving a subclass like basically additional hit die, but I think it's a little bit too weird. When this is kind of the only class in the game that gets to do something like that, I probably wouldn't call it great design. But I kind of like the concept of, like, these guys are good after a short rest. I mean, fighters are already really good after short resting, so I like that this one's playing into that. And I also just really like the, expertise and athletics. I think classes getting more access to expertise is probably a good thing. I think it's definitely a little bit weird. Somebody pointed out to me that, like, theoretically, the smartest of wizards with, proficiency in Arcana probably won't be as good at Arcana checks as, like, a rogue who's kind of good at it. Just a little weird. So again, yeah, I like the idea that more classes can get access to the double proficiency bonus thing. Next up, Crosscleave. And my apologies if I'm mistaken. I'm far from the most prolific Final Fantasy player. I've played quite a few, and I've played 7 most of the way through. But Crosscleave was not Cloud's ability, to my knowledge. Because if I'm looking here correctly, Crosscleave starts in Final Fantasy X, whereas Cloud gets Cross Slash. Again, I could be mistaken, and this is just nitpicking, but I'm just making sure. When you make a reference to a game, you gotta be right, or else, oh jeez, what's the point? Anyhow, back to it. Crosscleave. At 10th level, you can use your action to initiate a hailstorm of blows. You may make up to 5 attacks consecutively against a single target. Each attack you choose to make after the first will have a -1 penalty to attack and damage. If you miss any of the slashes in the sequence, your target may make an opportunity attack. If the opportunity attack is successful, your combination will be interrupted, and you may not make any more attacks this round. If you successfully land 5 attacks, the last one will automatically be a critical hit. You may use this ability 2 times per short or long rest. Okay. That was a lot. Let's try to dissect that. You may make up to 5 consecutive attacks against a single target. That's cool. That's very similar to what he does in the game. He runs up to a guy and 5 attacks is a lot, especially because at level 10 you would normally only still have 2. You do get a third one at level 11. Well, let's keep going here. Each attack you choose to make after the first will have a -1 penalty to attack and damage. -1 is not a lot, but it is something. I don't know if he's attempting to say that you get, like, a concurrent -1 penalty to attack and damage. That was kind of my first thought, was, first one's -1, then the next one's -2, then -3. But that's not what the wording says. So we're going under the assumption that it's just -1. I think that is bad design. I understand what they're trying to go for here. In Pathfinder, this would have been fine. When -1s were, super common back then, it just makes sense. In 5th edition, -1 penalties are nowhere. You either have disadvantage in 90% of cases, or the one odd case is you get -5 from Great Weapon Master, the feat that lets you add +10 to damage if you basically call your shot. The next closest thing would be Cover, which gives somebody +2 to AC, which is similar. But either way, that's even a little odd. The -1 penalty, I don't like this. If you miss any of the slashes in the sequence, your target may make an opportunity attack. Okay, so I think they should specify that they get to make the attack against you. I'm sure that's implied, but again, you should say it. If their opportunity attack is successful, your combination will be interrupted, and you may not make any more attacks this round. I think that part's kind of cool. It basically is them interrupting your chain of attacks, so there's some risk to your reward here. If you successfully land 5 attacks, your last will be an automatic crit. I don't like the idea of automatic crits, but I suppose this one is pretty apt. If we're trying to do the math, let's say we have somebody with 17 AC. Should be pretty normal-ish by level 10. Your average fighter at this level will probably have +8 to hit, from +5 from strength, +3 from proficiency. You'd probably have a +1 weapon at this point, but let's not assume that. So if you have +8, enemy has 17 AC, means you would need to roll a 9 to hit them, which gives you roughly a 60% chance to hit somebody with every hit. About 55 with that -1 penalty that happens on every attack other than the first. So here's what is most likely going to happen when you use this ability. You are going to initiate it. You make the first attack. No penalties. 60% chance to hit it. If you hit, cool. Move on to the second attack, which now has a -1 penalty to it. If you hit, again, 55% chance, and this is giving, pretty decent odds. Better if you have advantage, which that is the one nice thing about the -1 penalty, is it doesn't stop here if you have advantage. But assuming you don't, so if you have a 60% times 0.55 for the second hit, about a 33% chance that you hit both of these attacks. So level 10, you have about a 33%-ish chance, again, following our loose math here, to hit 2 attacks. To hit the third one, 18% chance. So again, level 11, you're going to have 3 attacks, just normally. You have roughly an 18% chance to hit 3 attacks with your Crosscleave. Again, this gets significantly better if you're fighting enemies with really low AC. If you're fighting like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, who has, 13 AC, don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of health, but its AC is pretty low. These numbers go up. There are monsters as low as 3rd CR that can have 17 AC. So just to finish this up, if we want to try to get your average fighter, when you first get this ability against an enemy with 17 AC, has about a 5% chance to hit all these 5 attacks. So, this ability isn't as overtly strong as I had initially thought, because my first thought was 5 attacks? Wow, that's busted. But the likelihood of getting all 5 attacks off is low. It's not exactly great against mooks, because they have to be 5 attacks against the same target, so it might be overkill. And if you miss any of them, you get a hit for it. You get an opportunity attack against you. Which the opportunity attack could miss. You are a fighter, you have armor. Regardless, I do think it is a little bit much to be able to use this ability twice per short or long rest. I'd say either once per short rest, or maybe a proficiency times per long rest. Maybe. I'd probably just call it 1 per and call it good. The other thing, with it like it is, I was also a little bit worried about, action surge in here, because potentially 10 attacks. But it does say you can't make any more attacks this round, not just that your Crosscleave ends. So you can't do that if you miss any in the first one. So potentially if you have, god luck, you can hit 10 attacks in a round. I suppose we can do the math on that one real quick. So again, we'll do this as an optimistic one. Your level 10 fighter has +3 proficiency, +5 from strength, and let's say he has a +1 weapon. That gives him +9 to hit. If the enemy has 13 AC, he only needs to roll a 4 or higher to hit them. Which means he only has there are only 3 things he can roll to miss, so that's a 15% chance to miss, or an 85% chance to hit. So he has 0.85 for the first one. 80% for every attack next after that, so 0.8 point times 0.8 for the third attack, fourth attack, fifth attack. So in this situation, he has a 35% chance to hit them all. You know, super often is going to happen every time. And then he hits all of them, gets that automatic crit, action surge, do it again. Wow, broken. Super strong. But yeah, so I gotta admit, don't love the design of this ability, but I don't think it's as strong as initially I read. Level 15, insanely big. At level 15, you can use a bonus action to increase the size of your weapon by 1 category for 1 minute. Doing so will increase the damage die step by 1 step, and will cause your attacks to affect an area in a 15-foot horizontal line in front of you. You may use this ability once per short or long rest. Kind of weird idea here, of temporarily growing your sword even bigger. Neat concept, awkward wording. Like, it affects an area in a 15-foot line in front of you? Does that mean every attack you make hits all these people in this line? Does that mean you just have a long reach? I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to go for, especially because of their ability from a man and a weapon where they get to strike 2 creatures within 5 feet of each other with a single attack. Does that mean if somebody's 15 feet away and then you hit them with your sword, potentially all the other people in front of them too, do you get to hit somebody that's 20 feet away now? It's just a little bit awkward, and I don't quite understand the flavor they're trying to go for by only getting 1 minute of bigger sword. A little bit odd. The damage increases, again, not much. It's 1 per attack. Level 15 is fine. I think that's a little strange. It's a minute worth, and it gets it back on a short rest. Which, that means it's pretty often uptime. They're going to be able to, you know... There'll be some times where they don't have this, but when it's coming back on a short rest, they'll have it most of the time, most fights. This one, I think, definitely needed a little bit better wording to make it entirely clear what the concept is. Last ability, Omni Whirlwind. Beginning at 18th level, you may activate your Crosscleave in a 15-foot cube around. Each creature in a 15-foot area around you must make a successful dexterity saving throw, 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus strength modifier, or be knocked into the air. While knocked in the air, each creature will be automatically struck by every attack used in your Crosscleave ability. You may use this ability once per long rest, and after doing so, you suffer 1 level of exhaustion. Man, if you didn't know it was a reference to a video game, you probably do now. This just reads like something out of Final Fantasy, and I appreciate it, but it's a little bit weird in my D&D game. So, trying to break this apart. Every creature in a 15-foot area around you must make a dex saving throw. If they fail, they are knocked into the air. Again, this is one of those things, I know what they're trying to go for. I know they're just trying to like say, oh yeah, they're in the air, and then you slash them a whole bunch, and then they fall back to the ground. That's not quite how D&D works. D&D usually comes a little bit more realism than that. People don't just get knocked into the air and hover there while you slash at them a bunch. I'm not saying D&D can't go there, I'm just saying it generally doesn't. So, that makes so you can hit them all with your Crosscleave ability, I think. This is a confusing wording. While knocked in the air, each creature will be automatically struck by every attack used in your Crosscleave ability. Does that mean you can't miss? I don't know. First read through, I just assumed that meant that you could make 5 attacks against each person that failed, which that's one thing. That's a crap ton of damage. I know I was just saying Crosscleave was kind of okay in the last one, but when you get to do it against, potentially however many creatures are in a 15-foot cube around you, we'll generally assume probably 2, because 2, 3, maybe tops. I just think it's a little bit weird. They definitely need to word that a little bit better, because I really cannot tell if they're trying to say that you automatically hit, or if you have to roll separately for each thing, or do you roll once for each attack, or do you just roll once for each attack and see what hits? I don't know. The one part I do like is you can use this ability once per long rest, and after doing so you will suffer 1 level exhaustion. I think a lot more abilities could use that. I think it's super flavorful, giving it that whole, last hurrah kind of thing, like the Frenzied Barbarian. Frenzied Barbarian does it, and that's not Homebrew. So I think it's cool. Cool concept. It gives it that very much anime feeling of just this once, master, I must go all out. And then you get to do like cool shit, but you suffer for it later. It's cool. It makes for good moments. So I like that. But the rest of this wording is not great. So that is the soldier. As you might have been able to tell, this hasn't been my favorite homebrew I've read. There's definitely some awkward wordings, abilities not quite doing what they should, and being just really limited in your roles. So I didn't want to just tear into this. I wanted to give some constructive feedback, and I've tried making my own version that I think hopefully is just a little bit better. This is my version of the soldier. Same flavor, different mechanics. So, level 3, I also have a man and his weapon. You, again, also make a ritual over the course of an hour to alter your weapon. Though I do specifically mention in this one that you're not actually just making the weapon bigger, you're doing something to make it more yours. I want to take a little bit away from the you are using a giant two-handed weapon. Like I had mentioned, I don't like it being locked into one kind of weapon, so this is me just kind of expanding out. Now you can play as somebody with a dagger that they're very attached to. Just by changing that little mechanic, you can come up with a whole bunch of different kind of character ideas. I've included a table here. The original is what your weapon starts as. So if a dagger is a d4, it upgrades to a d6 after you've completed your ritual. And I've also included the second column for eventually the level 15 ability. Otherwise, pretty similar mechanically, other than I've taken that cleave a bit, and now there's a second ability that you get at level 3. And when you hit somebody with a melee attack, using your bonded weapon, you can choose to also make another melee attack against another creature within your reach. Just clarifying there a little bit. So I have actually kind of limited a little bit so that you can't use this ability with a ranged weapon because it brings up odd questions of how that works. So, and you can only do it once per short rest now. So is it a little on the weak side? Yes. I think it's still plenty usable though. You basically just get an extra free cleave kind of attack once per short rest. Strict Regiment. I kept the first half where you get proficiency or expertise in athletics. However, I have changed up that hit die bit to be, instead of you just have 2 additional hit dies, now you can, similar to the Great Weapon fighting style, you can reroll on a 1 or 2. You got to keep the second result, even if it's also a 1 or a 2. Just because those rules are a little bit more well explained throughout, 5th edition's rulebook than what he had gone with. I renamed the 10th level ability to Cross Slash, just because it would have bugged me if I didn't. When you make the attack action, you can choose to make twice the amount of attacks you would normally make. So if you normally have 2, you can make 4. If you normally have 3, you can make 6. When you use this feature, you can't do it in any until you finish a long rest. So I've changed this one up quite a bit, as you can tell. Got rid of all that awkward wording. Got rid of the risk factor. It's pure upside now, which, take it or leave it. I liked the risk-taking aspect of PapaQuackers' version, but like I pointed out, the likelihood of you actually getting to use all of it was a very low percentage. Now, it's a lot more consistent with the amount of attacks you can make per time. This is kind of like a just much more limited version of Action Surge, to be honest. But it does stack with Action Surge, so potentially at level 11, you can make 9 attacks in one round. You can only do that once a day, of course, but I think that makes for a pretty strong move. Level 15, I got rid of that whole you can use it a minute a day thing. It's now just a passive upgrade. I think having a little bit more simplicity is better. Gets rid of all that really weird wording with the 15-foot range on your attack or what have you. That's all gone. Most fighter abilities at this level are usually pretty simplistic as it is. They aren't getting a whole lot of weird new stuff. So I think keeping it this simple, this easy, is probably an upgrade. Last ability, Omni Slash. As an action, choose up to 15 creatures within 20 feet of you. Make a melee weapon attack against each of them. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So, Omni Slash, in the game, you go up and hit somebody 15 times, each time being a crit, but the crit does less damage than a normal crit. Trying to translate that to a D&D setting would have been crazy. Can you imagine just, even if everything was at disadvantage, 15 attacks against one guy would be insane. Even if they did half damage, it would be insane. So I wanted to work the number 15 in here somewhere. Here it is. 15 creatures within 20 feet of you. You have this pretty big AoE. You still get this kind of anime moment of you basically dashing back and forth to hit all 15 creatures and, you know, still end up in the same spot you are. Kind of stole the concept a little bit from Steel Wind Strike, the 5th level spell, and I think it makes for a pretty cool ultimate move. It probably does still have, there's, wording could be better here, because I don't specify that you don't really move. Couldn't think of a really good way to word that better. If you guys have any suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them. But with that, that gets through all of my version. Again, there's enough changes here, but it's pretty similar to the last version. You know, have bigger weapon that you're good with, a lot of hidden people. But in summary, the PapaQuackers version is just fine. I don't think I'd probably allow it in one of my games, just because I don't think it brings anything super new to the table that is worthy of... Just because when you have to allow homebrew into your games, and this is for pretty much any DM that isn't just super laissez-faire about it, you want to read over the homebrew. You want to make sure you're not allowing someone in your game that is super conflictory with any of your story's lore. You don't want to just let anything in that's OP. So I know if my players bring me anything, I read through the whole homebrew. That's how I imagine most DMs go about it. If they allow homebrew at all, they read through most of it. And I don't quite think my version or the PapaQuackers version really bring enough that it really warrants bringing it to the table. I think you could do a lot of reflavoring with the champion fighter or any other kind of fighter to get pretty similar ideas. Both of them are fine and balanced. I like, if a DM told me that he was allowing this one in his game, I wouldn't call him out for it. I just don't know if I'd put the effort into reading it myself for my game. So, overall score for both PapaQuacker version and my version, probably call it a 3 out of 10. It's a lot of reading for something that's kind of forgettable. Yeah, the level 10 and the level 18 abilities are pretty darn cool. It gets some of those limit breaks from Final Fantasy into the game, but most games don't go to level 10 as it is. So pre-level 10, you basically have a champion fighter, other than the whole line right down here about striking 2 creatures, which is pretty strong. But again, otherwise, there's not really... I try to judge most subclasses in general, but especially fighter subclasses, by this level 3 ability. Because fighters don't have a lot of buttons in the first place. You got Action Surge and Second Wind and a fighting style. That's not a whole lot of stuff to remember. So I usually hope that a fighter like Battlemaster gets something super interesting level 3 to hopefully give me something to think about while I'm waiting on my turn. I don't think this class does it for me. So it's definitely just not within my playstyle. I'd never pick a champion fighter either, though, so it is what it is, I suppose. But with that, I have nothing else more to say. So if you guys have any comments, suggestions for either my version or the PapaQuackers version, please put them in the comments below. Again, links to all PapaQuacker stuff in the description. And with that, everybody have a nice day. Bye-bye.